Welcome to the War Room, powered by Prep Baseball and Draft HQ. Shooter and Svihlik back at it. We talked a lot of the position players from the All-American game last time. DJ, we got to dive into the pitchers, but before we get there, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the over-encompassing summer. This kind of, the All-American game kind of closed the door, they closed the book on the summer. And I always, as a former pitcher, really consider the workload, what guys are doing, where they're at in their process, and then to get to this kind of the finish line of the September 13th, 14th-ish area before shutting down going to the off season. I wanted to ask you right off the jump, just throwing you right into the deep end. How do you plan to evaluate a guy in his draft year? This is, for a lot of these 25s, their last outing prior to the new year. How do you evaluate what you see there? What are your checklists going into an event like this when you're looking at arms like that for the last time?
Yeah, it's a good question, Shooter. And I think, you're a pitcher, so you can probably gather some of the things I'm going to talk about. When you're looking at it through the lens of a scout, I think what you really want to ask yourself are, what's the pitch package look like? What are the physical traits of this pitcher? Okay. What's the pitch package? How does he move? What's the body look like? So you try to have a few different boxes that you're going to check off. Of course, you're going to you're going to nod towards the performance, but more than anything else, when you sit down with your group of scouts, you might say, hey, we just saw this guy shooter hunt. What specifically do we need to know between now and February? And what type of gap does shooter need to close between now and next June to make him a high impact target for us? So you check the boxes of his breaking ball and his changeup and his delivery and his arm action. You check the box of, what are we going to do to find out what his progression has been? Of course, you do some makeup stuff, but ultimately you have to be able to, sorry about that. You have to be able to ask. That was my bad.
You're Adam Schefter back there. No, you're getting the tweets. We got the free agencies coming. It's the end of the year. You got big stuff coming.
Well, for the perceptive viewer or listener, they would have quickly picked up on my Ohio State thing for my phone and my red and white.
I know Steph in the background filling in for Rhett the Jet there. Definitely
understood. That's right. That's Steph lives in Columbus. He got it. So yeah, you want to have an understanding of, like, what is their fastball on a grading scale? What is their breaking ball on a grading scale, using both subjective and objective information? Do they have a feel for their changeup? What does their body look like? How did they get to where they are? Those pitchers that we just saw in Miami, they didn't just come out of nowhere and land there at the All-American game.
Yeah.
There was a progression involved that allowed those players to achieve and get better over the course of the last couple of years, which culminates in putting them on a big stage like that. But guess what? They are not a finished product. And there's a lot of hurdles that they're going to have to overcome, whether it's the very, very best guy that was there or some of the lesser players that were there. But either way, it's up to the organizations going forward to identify the questions that need to get answered and then figure out a way how they're going to answer them between now and next February. And certainly you can answer questions between now and next February. Makeup, what's the progression? And then what questions need to be answered when they get to June, which is decision time.
Is there something to be said for guys who answer the bell? I'm always, honestly, going back as a pitcher, always concerned about health, workload. Guys who answer the bell each start. They went through their spring season. They hit the circuit. Every stop, they did their thing. I'm thinking of like a guy like Jordan Martin did that. I'm going through our entire list here, but Martin really stood out. Landon Harmon, another one who we see NPI all throughout the summer. He's shown big velocity. Let's actually talk about those two kind of to kick things off, right? Those were guys that hit every stop. You saw Landon Harmon kicking off the summer at NPI, big, vicious fastball. And then a guy like Jordan Martin, who you also got a chance to see, big physical frame. Each stop he was there. Is that something that you kind of note, like, hey, this guy came each time and still kind of held on to what he had?
Yeah, I think that's exciting when a player does that. You'd say the same thing about a position player when they post all the time. It just gives you more confidence and it puts more weight behind your evaluation. Whether it's every time we see him, he's 90 to 93. Every time we see him, he's showing a plus breaking ball. I think you bring up a really good point before we dive into those two players specifically. And I want to make sure I put this out there. It's really important to understand with pitching versus position players.
Mm.
The progression for pitchers is never linear. Very rarely is it linear. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's not always logical. It's not step by step. These pitchers can either explode to the upside at any given moment in time, or they can really go far backwards. Could be an injury, they can lose a breaking ball. So, to your point on when they post all the time, yeah, it gives you a lot of confidence. But for people that go out and evaluate a lot of pitching, you just really need to understand that it's not always a linear progression. And for that reason, we want to make sure that we're more aggressive with our evaluations with our pitchers. We want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You might say, if I'm leaning between two groups or two lanes to put them in with a pitcher, I'm going to err to the upside because I want to make sure that DJ Svihlik, that Shooter Hunt, that David Seifert is in the yard immediately when that pitcher posts because you don't know when he's going to explode. Use the example of Noah Syndergaard.
Okay.
A good example of that. But going back to Jordan Martin and to the other one you said, Harmon. Harmon I saw multiple times.
Yep.
He's been very, very consistent. His velocity wasn't quite as high as I had seen him in the past, but that's fine. We know that he's got a really, really good arm. He was still able to get it up into the mid-90s. And in his case, posting a lot, and you said he's pitched a lot, you weren't sure exactly what you were going to get at the All-American game. You didn't know if he was going to be tired. We talked about Seth Hernandez through over 70 innings as a high school junior. So we didn't get a lot this summer. Landon, a little bit different. He's pitched a lot, but he came out and he posted, and we were talking about on the broadcast, he was able to show you his breaking ball, which has been a little bit of a Achilles heel for him.
And honestly, those two are very similar. And we go back, as always, get used to it. Anybody who's listening, that this or that, both big frame, loose lefty or loose righties. Jordan Martin, I would say a bit more athletic. There's clearly a high ceiling. What I love about Jordan Martin was it's been pretty much the same stuff. You're going to get 91 and 94 for the most part, touch a 6 at some point this summer. The breaking ball and the changeup, he threw both at the All-American game. And for me, it was getting him into a lane. Okay, checklist, sliders starting to get a little bit better. Changeup's there. He's going to play hoops, so it may not jump, but that's going to be the thing we circle back for. What is the secondary doing? Where are we at? Because the arm strength's going to be there. He's going to grow into that big frame. And even more like, let's stay more specific to Jordan Martin. You're scouting him. You have him in your lane. You're the scouting director. He's going to play hoops. He's going to play basketball. He's a big hooper. Do you plan yourself to go to Missouri a little bit later? Allow him to kind of get into the season versus, hey, I got to be there first start.
Well, that's where we have these different layers of scouts. This is where the area scout becomes really, really important. So the question you might ask, as simply as it might sound, we're having a preseason meeting. Hey, what do we need to be thinking about with Jordan? Is he the kind of guy that's going to be ready right out? Some guys are. They're ready to go right out of the gate. Some guys are not. Carson Milbrand, a couple of years ago, we drafted him out of Missouri. He was a basketball player as well. He was ready to go right out of the gate. So really, it's a case by case. Generally speaking, I would say you'd err on the side of let the area scout go in there first. But if this is a case where the player is going to be ready, then you can just go plowing in there.
So from an area scouts side of things, when you're as the director, and I've noticed it probably more recently, you get a lot of guys who are just absolute grinders, right? They want to get in there, see everything. Hey, when are you throwing a bullpen in the winter? When are you doing this? We want to be there. But a lot of times those bullpen sessions, right? Jordan Martin, hey, he's going to work on that slider, right? If he wants to go to the SEC, he wants to go to the big leagues, whatever it may be, that slider is going to have to make a jump for him. Do you need to really see how the sausage is made behind the scenes and go and see what he's tinkering on versus, hey, let him do his thing for 8 weeks. I will go play catch up. Is it important to see the process or more so to see the product?
Now, Shooter, that is a really good question. I think teams attack that from very, very different angles. My personal belief is that, you want to see how, so you said, you want to see how the sausage is made, because that just involves really getting to know the player and what he's all about, how he goes about his work. You're developing a rapport with the player behind the scenes. You're getting to know the player, the family, whoever his pitching coach is. And I think that deeper understanding of the player gives you a better chance to understand what that player is all about right now and what he has the potential to be. With that said, There's plenty of organizations that don't subscribe to that, which is fine. They're going to show up over the course of the year. They're going to say, that's the talent, and I'm just taking it. I'm not too worried about how the sausage was made. All I care is the sausage was made, and it's pretty good sausage.
It's that's a good line.
That's it.
Now, comparing, because Harmon, both of them, to an extent, had great conversations with both those guys. Great kids. Harmon's a little bit different because it's kind of a unicorn fastball. It's going to grade out as one of the better fastballs in this prep class. It's explosive stuff. I like to use the term sizzle. Like, it's just different in person. It's uncomfortable to be in the box.
Yeah.
But the learning curve and aptitude, I just don't know quite as many, right? You get a lot of Southern California kids, guys who have been in the lab. They have Noble Meyer, who you took. Noble was acutely aware of his spin metrics, what he could do, hand placement, where he was going to be able to make some changes. I don't think these guys have started to do that yet. Is that something that may help spark value? Because they were both good at All-American game. End of the summer, not worried about too much about the stuff. Hey, they posted, they're good, they're healthy, they're going to go in the off season. Do you consider the fact that, hey, they may not know about finger placement on a slider? They may never have been taught a knuckle curve or something like that. Is that something internally with PD you're like, hey, we can get this and do some stuff with it?
Yeah, it's about identifying opportunities. If I can turn back the clock a little bit, going to see Brandon. It's hard to even describe what Brandon Woodruff looked like in high school. And then he explodes to become a tremendous big league pitcher. You're familiar with Mississippi State, right? Your brother went there, and you knew that Brandon Woodruff had talent. There was no question about that. When it was Jeff Wood was the area scout, I believe, for the Rangers when they drafted him out of high school, or Giants. Okay. I can't remember what that was, but it was Jeff Wood. And I remember Jeff talking about Brandon, and we saw Brandon. He wasn't ready out of high school. And if you would have seen where Brandon was from, you'd have understood why he wasn't quite ready. He didn't have the opportunity to be around the same type of resources that Andrew Painter was around, that Jackson Jobe was around, that Noble Meyer was around, or even Thomas White up at Andover. Some of these, or even, how about Carson Milbrandt when we drafted him? He was working out with, I can't remember what was his name of his pitching coach. It was with the
Missouri does such a great job with arms, so I'll give you a second to think there. They just turn out 100-mile-an-hour arms.
So like it's what, so when you look at a player like Brandon Woodruff, what's the opportunity there? When you look down at your stat sheet and you go, East Union Attendance Center. Sounds like a pretty small school to me. Sounds like a pretty small area to me. Is the player, is in this case Landon, is Landon, A, does he identify what he's going to have to do? And B, is he going to have the resources to make it happen? And if he doesn't, between now and February, the question for the teams would be, maybe he just doesn't have the opportunity, but he really wants it. Do we believe that as soon as we take that player from this small area, that we can help his breaking ball almost immediately? And that's where a player like that, getting him on a machine, getting him at pre-draft workouts becomes very, very important.
It's so very fascinating with those guys. I do want to shift over, and you had a great note talking about Angel Cervantes, who started off the game. I think he threw 9 pitches in the first inning, just let the Young Bucks know who the big dog in town was, and really setting the tone for the game. But your note was you kind of have them set tiered, and we have them fairly prevalent on our board right now. How is the stuff going to jump? And that's going to kind of dictate the upside, because it was really good stuff again, right? He's posted at each stop. I saw him at the West Coast Pro Case. He was up to 94 in this look. Looked like he was featuring a sinker and a four seam, which kind of separating those two, the fact that he has the ability to manipulate the fastball, 3,000 plus spin on the breaking ball, killing spin on the changeup. It's a starter profile. But I really want you to talk about, hey, he's set. Will the stuff jump? What type of jump is the expectation to allow him to kind of get into that elite level?
Yeah, that's a great one. And I just remember, like, throughout my career, seeing guys in the minor leagues and doing a lot of pro scouting and whatnot, and seeing players. And I remember Jeremy Hellickson, and I bring this one up for people listening. Jeremy Hellickson out of Iowa, upper Midwest player. I want to say Jeremy was taken by the Rays in the 4th round, somewhere out there. As soon as Jeremy showed up, he was really, really good right away. But the reason why he falls maybe into the third or the fourth round is he doesn't have the electric stuff of a Noble Meyer or as a Thomas White. And that certainly doesn't diminish his prospect value. In fact, there's a lot of college pitchers that you would compare a Jeremy Hellickson to, where you're watching it going, it's like watching a college guy. And that's a big, big compliment to a high school player. So when you watch a guy like Angel Cervantes, who does what he did at the area codes and then comes out and does something very, very similar, this is the epitome of Mr. Consistency. So what happens with a player like this is no, maybe you don't just pocket him right there into the first round, but he becomes a target shortly thereafter. And you say, what's the difference between 18-year-old Angel Cervantes and the guy that's a great pitchability guy at the University of Tennessee or at the University of Texas or at Southern California, whatever it might be? So you just take this younger guy, whether he's signable or not. Now, to make the jump that you're referring to, this proverbial jump, you certainly would like to see the fastball maybe not consistently get out of that 90 to 93 range, but you like him to show you a little bit more top end or get a little bit stronger to make you believe that once he gets into pro ball, there's nothing wrong with settling into 91 to 94. You can pitch in the big leagues at 91 to 94 if you can do some of the things that he can do. But in terms of giving you the confidence to pay a higher dollar amount, you just want to see some higher top end velocity, regardless of whether or not he holds it or not. Because that's also going to impact his other pitches probably. The more arm strength he gains, the breaking ball can get a little sharper and so on and so forth. The one thing we love, he's not going to lose his ability to throw strikes and pitch, which is great.
And to compete more than anything.
Yeah.
Just thinking right here, and this will definitely catch a lot of ears from around the scouting community. But I look back to a guy, Jared Ritchie, and there are some similarities, strike throwers, competitiveness. I actually think Cervantes' pure stuff is better than Ritchie's. I saw JR a fair amount being here in the Pacific Northwest, but they're kind of on a similar plane. And I'm sure a lot of guys like JR more, they could bring up stuff with Angel, and the fastball data sets are what's going to be interesting for Angel, right? How is that fastball going to play? What do we think he can do? I do think his aptitude in being able to make adjustments, whether it's going to be a cutter in the future, he'll be able to do stuff like that. But there are some similarities to the way the stuff plays from going back to the Jared Ritchie. So like that's something I will be thinking about, right? In those subsequent looks, I'll probably see Angel 2-3 times throughout the spring. There will be a Jared Ritchie in my head. Is this Jared Ritchie? Is it better than Jared Ritchie? Where is he?
You need to know as an organization, as a scouting staff, like how did this player get here? Again, like I mentioned 15 minutes ago, players don't just appear out of nowhere. There's a progression that they've gone through to get to where they are. So when you look at this player, or, you brought up Harmon or whoever it might be, you really need to know what the progression has been so that you can most accurately predict maybe what the progression is going to be going forward. And secondarily, you're going to get a lot of measurements on this player. There's a lot of things they do at the combine. There's a lot of things that teams do by themselves to take measurements and try to figure out where can we get that velocity projection. And it goes way beyond just layback and hip shoulder separation, these more traditional things that we've talked about historically, which are still valid and they still work, but we've got a lot of tools to figure out if he's going to throw a little bit harder. So I tend to like these kinds of guys. I do like skilled players, whether it's a position player or it's a pitcher. It tends to demonstrate what the player is all about. He's not chasing exit velocity. He's not chasing pitching velocity. He's doing things. He's comfortable in his own skin. He's comfortable with his own progressions. He's very self-aware. And along the way, he just keeps collecting outs, which is what the game's all about.
Love it. Get outs, post zeros. Moving along, a couple more right-handers I want to talk about, and we'll get to Josh Hammond in a second because at this point, I'm so adamant about him making sure he swings the bat and stays on the dirt to the point where, hey, this pitching thing you can do in the end. Like, so somebody will throw you up there. If the hitting doesn't work out, you'll be more than fine. You'll catch up in a hurry, and you'll have had a nice long rest to do that. But Reed Worley, I really want to come in on him because he was a marquee guy coming out of the spring. And Ian Smith down in Georgia, Hudson Graham, they do such a great job down there. And Ian especially was banging the drum all spring. This guy Worley, man, this guy Worley's really good. And right, it's not It's not LSU, Texas, UCLA, whatever, Vanderbilt, whatever it may be. This kid's committed to Kennesaw State. Now, that staff has done a phenomenal job identifying talent and keeping guys in state on board there. But Reed Worley can really spin the baseball, which obviously is my sweet tooth. So he was up to, I think, close to 3,400 RPM at one point. But he goes out there, end of the summer. I saw him back in February on about a 35-degree day at GDC. He's going all the way through, still 90, 92 plus, spotting to both sides, real nice changeup. And obviously that spin was just had guys buckling, collecting swords. What did you think of Worley?
I'm laughing because as I listen to you talk about Kennesaw State, and this is going to be a shout out. Are we surprised that they're good recruiters? I mean, you just look who they have on their coaching staff.
Some good scouts.
I've known Ryan Coe for a long time. Number one, Ryan Coe is a Kennesaw State guy. And then he went to the pro side for a long time, and then he comes back to his alma mater. Brad Tyler, of course, really, really good professional hitter all the way up to AAA. Brad worked on my staff before he went back to Kennesaw. So this is a staff that knows what they're looking at. They know how to project. So to see them take down a guy like Reed Worley is really, really impressive, but not surprising. You can only imagine when they committed him what he looked like. He's still not a big guy. What do they have Worley listed at here? We have him listed at 6'2", 180. But compared to these other monsters that roll out on the mound, he looks like just another guy.
Yeah.
What did they see? One of the things you see with Worley, why do you get excited when he goes to the mound? Because you're going to get a high level of compete. You're going to get a high level of confidence. There is no fear. I don't know if he's going to throw harder, but I know he will never be afraid. I can assure you that. Reed Worley did it. He did it at East Coast Pro. We saw him at the PG game, or not the Padres at the Padres Stadium with the All-American game, and then we see him again at our All-American game, ripping sliders, competing his butt off, athletic on the mound. Do I want to see more velocity? Yes, but I don't know where he's come from. I don't know what that progression has been for him. So if he can do that, he's probably going to make a lot of people really happy because he's a very easy player to believe in.
It's the ingredients interviewing him too. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm always, I guess I gravitate towards guys who are kind of opposite of me, right? Me, when I'm going type A, don't talk to me on game day. I'm locked in, like all this stuff. That kid could easily go shoot 18 rounds, like go play golf, stroll to the field, get his long toss in, hit the mound, give you 7 strong, hit the showers, and maybe try to get it 9 in before it gets dark. Like that's the type of guy I think he is, but it's meticulous. He knows what his stuff does. I think it will jump. So I'm already planning a trip to see him in the spring. It was fascinating being around him.
You know this as an ex-player, and that's the one thing ex-players have. When you go out and scout, you don't always want somebody, the inclination from an ex-player is you want what you like, maybe what you didn't have, those kind of things. And when you see a guy like Worley, like, I mean, I obsessed over my ABs. And you know what? Pay it forward. I'm, in my mid 40s here, I obsessed over my draft decisions. That was just in my personality. I don't think as a player, that's a great thing. The whole short-term memory thing, the ability to have a bad outing and to internalize it, but then go play your round of golf and just be completely happy with that. That's a good thing. So when players have that, it's really good because they've got a release. They don't get so obsessed with what they're doing.
Well, we talked about it in the past, having something that the game can't take away. He definitely has that. I'm excited to see what he has. What about a guy that you liked at the end of the summer? I've been a huge fan of Justice DeYoung, who hopped on the mound, showed off big spin with the breaking ball. It was, I think the breaking ball is going to really help separate him. What was your takeaway from you? Had seen him in August, liked it. What was your takeaway from the All-American game?
Man, my takeaway is that this is a winning kid. I'm sitting there at our banquet, and I guess I shouldn't have been surprised when they announced his name as the top earner when he was
for versus cancer.
For the fundraising. Like, of course it's him. Like every time you see him, he gets outs, he competes, and you can imagine somebody saying, "Hey, we've got this fundraiser. We're going to try to raise some money." He's like, "Well, I'm going to win that too." And I just loved it. Like this guy. It started at East Coast. We talked about one of the things we talked about 10 minutes ago, consistency. And while a player doesn't have to be consistent to be a great prospect, because pitching is not linear and it can happen for a player at any given time. When they are consistent, you need to pay attention to it. We just talked about Cervantes. Every time he steps on the mound, you know what you're going to get.
Yep.
With our boy DeYoung, it's just a bigger, stronger version of that from what I've seen. So
being next to him, I was really impressed. I mean, he's got tree trunks for legs, which I was not ready for. He will be 17 on draft day, which is highly interesting. The competitive nature, and sometimes you need that, right? You need to trick yourself into he's a great kid off the field, right? Raises all this money, awesome, well raised. Mom was great. Once he gets between those lines, hey, switch flicked. I'm here to compete. I'm here to win. I'm here to dominate. Yeah. That's what I loved from him walking away. Another guy we'll be seeing Poly Prep plenty of times next year. They have more than they might have. Shoot, they may give Corona a run for their money with the best pitching staff in the country at this point. But I'm excited about him. I do want to finish up here, and I saved these three lefties for last for a good reason here. Caden Crowell, Johnny Slowinski, Briggs McKenzie, and kind of went into the event thinking, right, there's a little grouping, right? These lefties, they're in a group. There's probably 8 or 9 of them, few more here that have behind Appenzell or even Cruz Schoolcraft to an extent. Those two guys. Crowell, after a very long summer, spring, he's going to play hoops. Solid stuff. He was not his crispest, but the slider looked better. I was really intrigued by the fact that the fastball got a ton of swing and miss middle, which is interesting. He's still all stretch. I don't think he's scratched the surface of what he can be. Briggs McKenzie, who you loved at East Coast Pro. We saw him 2 years ago. And one of my favorite things, and I really want you to hone in on more so Briggs McKenzie and Johnny Slowinski here. But my favorite thing about this All-American game, right? It's the end of the season. Some guys are shutting down, whatever it may be. These guys that we love internally, you know, those picks to click. We'll talk about sleepers on a future episode. Guys like Slowinski and Briggs McKenzie who come post open eyes and explode themselves into the helium stratosphere of a Dason Hill type. Talk about Brooks McKenzie first, because you saw him at East Coast Pro, and then we'll go into Johnny Slowinski from there.
Yeah, there was somewhat of an unknown with Briggs when I saw him, because I had never seen him before. And you and I had spoke prior to the event. You had a lot of track record on him and with what you were telling me. And then he was I don't want to say he was a pleasant surprise. He was just a guy that really stood out at East Coast Pro because of his ability, frame size, his ability to pitch, getting the fastball up to 93 from the left side, starter frame, the whole way there. So when you go into the All-American game, you just find yourself asking, is that how he always is? We know that Cervantes always is like that, but is this how Briggs, and he showed up at the All-American game and he did the same exact thing. You look at what strikeout, rollover, ground ball. Same thing, 90 to 93, shows his curveball, starter all the way.
2,900 plus.
Yeah, I mean, just like really good stuff under the hood, and like it's left-handed, and he has some mound presence to him. Looks like there's a little athleticism. So he replicates what he does at East Coast Pro, which gives you a lot of confidence. And then Slowinski, who I had never seen, I really like how he gathered over the rubber. He looked like a starter all the way. That was my first look at him. And what did he do? Strike out. So we can throw Crowell in there and we won't give away our sleeper from South Mississippi. Hint. But left-handers like this in general are a lot of fun, because here's what you know. You know that one of these guys is going to blow up. Mm-hmm. The other ones, maybe there's going to be another one's going to be like on the bubble of like, can we sign him? Can we not sign him? And then the other guy is going to end up at the University of Virginia, like our boy Kirk, and blow up in college, because everybody has a different development curve. But make no mistake, as an organization, as a scouting staff, you have to be ready to really scout all 3 or 4 of these players and find the one that you can really latch onto and sign out of high school. Heck, was it years ago, they took Robbie Ray in the 8th round and gave the Nationals took Robbie Ray in the 8th round. They certainly had him valued higher than that, but Robbie Ray was just like this coming out of high school. Mikey Minor was just like this coming out of high school. Actually, Mikey Minor would have been behind these guys because he was throwing 86. These guys were 90 to 93.
And I expect more. Like I always love to say, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. When a kid like that, Briggs McKenzie and Johnny Slowinski, they show up, this is as big a stage as you got. There's 120 pro scouts here. There's scouting directors, special assistants all over. To have that moment and to shine and allow those guys to book trips to see them. If any scouts listening, I know how important the makeup is. Those two were incredible interviews. I interviewed, I think, like 25 guys. Theirs will be coming out soon. Briggs was outstanding. LSU commit, like the confidence in this kid and what he was thinking throughout, that was awesome. And then Johnny Slawinski, and we can get to him right now a little bit more. I love how he moves too. The dynamic, just how dynamic he is. West Texas kid. It was very fascinating to hear about his programming, right? West Texas, he was flat out telling like, yeah, we don't really have those facilities by me. I go to the field with my catcher. I forget the kid's name, but I was like, this little 16-year-old bullpen catcher is on his own crafting one of the top prospects in the country right now. But to have 3 pitches, has not even started to think about, again, finger placement, the way he's moving down the mound, which side to throw on, how the arm's working, what his throwing program should be, where he can get to, what kind of weight programming can be. That's, to me, what gets exciting about the upside. There's so much that can be uncovered and extracted from the talent of a kid like Johnny Slawinski. I can't wait to see it happen.
Well, and that's why teams have to do their work. And you just made a great point. So much talent can be extracted. You need to know what the kid's all about. Because what happens with some of these players, they can't all be Cam Appenzeller. They can't all be Thomas White. Whether you're left-handed or you're right-handed, there's only so many Andrew Painters or Jackson Jobs or Noble Myers like in the country. Consensus, no doubt, we're going to go that route, regardless of what the outcome ultimately becomes with those players. There's just each year, there's only going to be a few of those. Most of the time, we're falling into this lane right here. And if I can put the Nationals on the pedestal for a second,
do it.
Mike Rizzo's group, he's been there forever. They took Robbie Ray. Who else did they take recently that they just absolutely nailed? They took DJ Hers out of North Carolina, and now he's in the big leagues for them. So these players, whether they get drafted in the second round, the first round, the fourth round, you've got to figure out which one of these guys is going to be the guy and which one is going to emerge as the guy. I mean, I guess you could have – there's a lot of players that I can use examples of, and whether they're signable or not is irrelevant. Slawinski, to your point, man, such a young-looking face, moves really, really well, throws strikes with his fastball, athleticism, delivery. You can only imagine what happens if strength and conditioning becomes a big part of his offseason programming, what this could become.
I do see those jumps. So that has it. Those are the 9, because Hammond, we'll get into more. We have lots to talk about in Hammond and the dynamic 2-way. Can't wait to see him at the Super 60. I just think he's going to really hit. He's going to we'll talk a lot about him. But I did want to touch in real quick on the 2026s. So just 2 guys kind of from the national side of things. Just as a scouting director, you go in, you see lefties like Gio Rojas and Carson Bowman. Yeah. Big time left-handed arms. And I kind of thought there might be a potential these guys would reclass. It looks like they're not going to. But Rojas starts off the game 90 to 93, 3 pitches for strikes, allows a hit as smartly the kids were in there. We had the big jumbotron was flashing signs showing the catcher behind the plate. So I'm glad we got that turned off in time. But it's so easy out of the hand. It just comes out so loose. And then Carson Bowman, who, I mean, shoot, he may have had the best stuff there. And it was coming out of the hand. And Jaden Fauske comes back to the dugout and goes, "That is the best arm I've faced, and that is the best breaking ball I have seen." Those 2 guys, how do you evaluate it, though, as, hey, you're sitting there as a scouting director, right? I don't have to worry about these guys. Are you locking in a little bit and just like taking note of those names? Yeah,
you made a great observation. I think in one of our last calls, we were talking about this, and it was on a recording. You talked about, let's just take a note. We don't have to lock in on them as much as we just need to know the names, who we need to go see. And the reality is, I think that's a great observation. You don't need to be able to cross every T and dot every I with these high school underclass pitchers. All you need to be able to do is look out on the mound, make a note about a Gio or make a note about Carson and go, those are elite looking guys. Double arrow up. Whatever your symbol is that you put on your card, you know that those are pitchers going forward. If you do get a little bit more granular, then you get into the why, and it just becomes, man, they move right. They're athletic. They're 90 to 93. They can spin it. You might put a little note down on your card. Geo, strength level, question mark. You might do that, but that's about all you're really going to do. Carson, to your point, as soon as Carson, I had never seen him. I knew that Geo was the top left-hander in the class.
Yep.
I didn't have any expectation that somebody can challenge him. As soon as Carson got off the mound, my note was versus Geo. He was that good. So to me, I already knew that those are the top two.
So I walk away, right, and have all this background. Carson Bowman has had Tommy John, and I'm thinking in my head, like, oh man, this guy had Tommy John. Oh, I wonder if that'll knock him down. I love everything, the makeup on this kid. And then I start thinking about Dax Fulton, the guy that you took.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that, I think I asked you, like, what is this kid's ceiling? Because the stuff is so good. He competes. He's a good athlete. Just like an absolute workhorse frame. Then I'm going to put you on the spot with this one. Hagen Smith. Hagen Smith had Tommy John after his sophomore year. I was there when it happened. And you think you lose sight of him. Then he has a great senior year. And then you allow him to go to Arkansas, right? You guys took Dax Fulton. You tried to steal the Hagen Smith years, right? We're going to try to get him before he gets his $8 million. We're going to get him at $2 million.
So I don't have any problem taking a high school guy that had a Tommy John. Mm-hmm. We can go way down the rabbit hole of what does the medical community say? What's your shelf life have after you have Tommy John? I've heard 6 years. I've heard 8 years. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I know this: when you get to know the kid, when you get to know the player, that becomes an extremely important piece of the pie, because you need to know what's the maturity level and how is this kid going to handle himself as he moves forward. Your comparison of Hagen Smith, I actually, as a scouting director, went in and saw Hagen Smith his senior year in high school. He didn't make it back yet. He had a really good year, but he didn't make it back from his Tommy John. What do I mean by that? His stuff relative to his signability didn't really match up, and you couldn't guess whether he was going to make it back. So you looked at him, and I want to say we had Hagen Smith in like the 3rd round. Well, that wasn't going to cut it. That wasn't going to get it done. In watching Carson Bowman, what are we, 9 months, 12 months almost from the draft, something like that? He was way further ahead of where get my names mixed up. He was way further along than Hagen was. So the expectation when you go out and see Carson next year, if he continues to make this jump, then he probably falls into this Dax Fulton category of, no, let's just go ahead and pay him now.
I got to tell you, doing this across 4 classes, it's always nice to have 2 big frontline left-handed arms to kind of situate nicely atop there. They would have been joined by Cruz Schoolcraft had he not reclassed. But that's it for today. Talking All-American Game arms, kind of wrapping up the All-American Game. Really looking forward, DJ, to hopping into some sleepers and getting into some area scouts and some helium guys, but more so the process of how the trickle down and the feeding up of information goes down. But DJ, thank you so much for today. Awesome getting through Miami. We need to start preparing for the winter. We got to get ready for fall. We got playoff baseball coming. But until next time, this has been the War Room powered by Prep Baseball and Draft HQ. We'll see you guys at the ballpark.